Lord, help us to see you more clearly, to love you more dearly, to follow you more nearly, day by day. Amen. Just to start us off, in case you were worried that we forgot to do the Passion narrative today, rest assured we will get to it. We're trying something a little bit differently this Palm Sunday because it's Palm Sunday. This is a special day of celebration in the church year. And so rather than breeze right past it and move right on to the Passion, we're going to spend a little bit of time celebrating and remembering Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem on this Palm Sunday. And then rest assured, we'll get to the Passion at the end. Today is Palm Sunday, this day that so many have been waiting for. Whether people have been following Jesus for a year or a few years, depending on which gospel you read. And it started off with a small group, maybe just a few fishermen. Then over time, as the former followers of John the Baptist started following Jesus instead. By the time Jesus was preaching and teaching, he had gathered a few hundred followers. By the time he was doing feeding of thousands, he had thousands of followers coming behind him saying, "This could be the one. This could be the Messiah we've been waiting for, the one who is supposed to triumphantly be our King of Kings and to defeat our enemies. It could be him." And so imagine this moment as Jesus has arrived at Jerusalem, the moment they've been waiting for. And as he begins to triumphantly enter into Jerusalem, they're waving palms and shouting, "Hosanna! Hosanna in the highest! Here comes our King!" And I have to wonder what some of them might have been thinking. Maybe a lot of them, as Jesus was entering. Did their minds go back to the enslavement in Egypt? Did their minds go back to the time that God sent them Moses to go and triumphantly lead them out to the Red Sea? And then as God parted the Red Sea and they marched triumphantly in, then the Egyptians followed in after them, and the waters closed up on them. And out in terror and trembling, the Egyptians cried out, my God, their God has turned against us." As he threw the chariots and the chariot drivers and the horses into the sea and destroyed the Egyptians. Was that what was about to happen? Was Jesus about to walk into Jerusalem and lay waste to the Roman Empire? Maybe it was going to be something simpler. Remembering the story of Jonah, who triumphantly entered into Nineveh, reluctantly at first, but eventually triumphantly entered into Nineveh, looked at the Assyrian people and said, "Behold, the time has come for you to change your ways. Our God is coming." And in fear and trembling, they turned and obeyed God. Was that what it was going to be like when Jesus comes into Jerusalem? Was he going to bend the will of others? Maybe they remember the time from Joshua, as Joshua led them in through the wilderness out against their foes, the Canaanites, as they marched on the city of Jericho. And as they circled the city and blew the shofars and the walls came crumbling down, Joshua entered triumphantly into the city as they marched in and slaughtered the Canaanite people. Was that what it was going to be like? Is Jesus leading us into armed conflict? Maybe it was going to be just 100 years earlier, in the time that their grandparents would have remembered and told the stories about the Maccabean rebellion, about the time the Maccabees would rise up and Judah Maccabee, the hammer, would enter triumphantly into Judah and lead guerrilla warfare against the Seleucid Empire and defeat them. Was that what it's going to be like? What is Jesus leading us into? And some, maybe a lot of the crowd, might have been looking forward to this conflict with the sword where Jesus would come in and destroy our enemies and rule as our king. Now we know that's not the kind of king he would turn out to be. And many of them, if they had been listening closely to Jesus, as we know some of them had a hard time doing, when Jesus would teach and they wouldn't quite understand, but maybe some of them, if they had been listening, they would have realized that wasn't at all the kind of king Jesus would be. That he was going to come in and not conquer our foes with the sword, or with condemnation, or with destruction. But he was going to come in and he was going to conquer them with life and forgiveness and with love. Because you see, the great foe that he had come to destroy, it wasn't the Roman Empire. It wasn't the Pharisees. It wasn't the tax collectors. The great foe that Jesus had come to destroy was our distance between us and God. It was the brokenness between our fellow human beings. That was the great enemy that Jesus had come to destroy, and destroy it he would, by coming in and by sharing a meal. By sharing a meal with his friends and those who looked like him and thought like him, but also sharing a meal with those who didn't like him, those who weren't in agreement with him. He shared a meal with them too. That's how he would conquer them. He would conquer our foes by not ruling as a king where we would grovel before him and wash his feet, but he would come down from the throne and say, "Who needs me to wash their feet?" He would offer forgiveness even to those who would hate him. Even on the cross, when he would turn to the criminal at his side and say, "You are forgiven." To the soldiers who would spit at him and mock him, to the crowds that would cry out, "Crucify him," he would offer them forgiveness and life. That's the kind of king Jesus came to be. It makes me wonder, in my own life, as we, in our lives, are we that different sometimes from that crowd of people crying out for triumphant conquering and bloodshed? We do as humans, perhaps something tied to original sin maybe. We run the risk when telling the story of triumphantly entering and saying, "God is on our side and we shall prevail," to use it in the wrong ways. It wasn't that long ago that Christian settlers came across the ocean to this native land that was populated with people that they subjugated and killed and took away their children and tried to destroy their way of life and said, "God is on our side." It wasn't that long ago where we engaged in the evils of slavery, where we looked at people who were of a different color of skin, came from a different land, and we said, "God's all right with you being enslaved to us because God is on our side." These are sins for which we have still not yet fully made amends. Albeit may have a long way to go before we've made amends. It comes in large and small. It comes in small, maybe in the form of every child who is either emotionally or physically abused by someone who says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child. That's what God teaches me. God is on my side." It comes from every war that is fought of a people of a different language and culture and religion, where we decide we have the right to kill anyone we want because God is on our side. It comes in the form of every hate group that goes out there and says, "God is on my side, so I get to hate you, I get to condemn you, I get to kill you." It can be a powerful thing to triumphantly enter in, joyously singing, "Hosanna, God is coming on our side." But we need to be careful about how we use it. So how do we do that? How do we remember the right way to triumphantly follow Jesus into Jerusalem on this day? I think a big part of it is, like I said earlier, not forgetting what kind of king, what kind of conquering king he was. Are we going to be the people that are going to say, God is on our side, and that's what strengthens us to go and share a meal with people? Not just our friends and family and those we like, but even with those whom we see differently. Are we going to share a meal with those because God is on our side? When we triumphantly enter into a land, are we going to use it to see how people can serve us? Or are we going to follow Jesus' example and look out at where there are people who need us? And because God is on our side, we have the ability and the strength to serve them. Are we going to be the kind of people that in the midst of difference and disagreement seek to be people of mercy and justice? And that even when we're hurt, are we going to follow Jesus in his pattern of forgiveness and offering life? On this day, I think the best way that we can celebrate the moment that Jesus triumphantly entered into Jerusalem is to not forget what he entered into Jerusalem to accomplish, and to realize that as much as he came to defeat the enemies of distance between us and God and brokenness between us, that work is not done. We still have more to do. And that's why on this day we take these palm fronds and we use them as an outward sign to say, Jesus, we will follow your lead into Jerusalem, honoring the kind of King of Kings that you would be and how you would have us serve this world in your name. That I think is the best way to honor Jesus on this day when he enters into Jerusalem. And we will follow the pattern this Holy Week of walking this week with Jesus as he has Maundy Thursday where he does the foot washing, and we do Good Friday service where we honor him and remember him on the cross, and we wait in vigil for that Easter day when the resurrection comes. But let us not have this Palm Sunday be just an introduction to the next week to come. Let us have this Palm Sunday be our introduction to our commitment to following our King of Kings the way he would have us lead. Thanks be to God. Amen.